Enjoy the journey. You have the power to choose. When you find yourself in a dark place, plug into your source and choose to live.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Pack Light Podcast with Travel Light Network and the Rewind Network. I'm Dee Wick, your host, and this podcast focuses on all things mental health recovery with discussions about navigating through the challenges of mental health, all while unpacking emotional baggage. Your presence here is deeply appreciated. Now, let's dive into our discussion. Welcome to the Pack Light Podcast. I'm Dee Wick, your host, and we are here today to discuss men and mental health. Men, have you ever had difficulty with prioritizing your emotions and expressing your needs? Today, we have three down-to-earth, dynamic men who are going to shed some much-needed light on men and mental health based on their own personal knowledge and experience with the subject. But before I do that, I just want to take an opportunity to read a article that we got from NAMI. And NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Health. And it has an article that is titled, What It Means to Be a Man. It's a great read when you have time. You'll find it on their website, and I'll put the link in the descriptions below. A snippet that I pulled was, did you know that more than 6 million men live with depression each year? Men are almost 4 times as likely to die from suicide as women. And 1 in 5 men will develop alcohol dependency during their lives. It's even worse for men who identify with groups that have been historically marginalized. Despite all of this, men are less likely than women to seek help for depression, substance abuse, and stressful life events. Why? One of the biggest reasons men often feel uncomfortable talking about their mental health, downplay their symptoms, and fail to reach out for help has to do with stigma and cultural norms about what it means to be a man. And I just want to take a moment to thank each one of you and every man that is under the sound of my voice. I don't think that our men are appreciated enough. And I just want to take a moment to edify you and to let you know that you are important, you are necessary, you are needed, and you are appreciated. So with the thought of stigma, Demetrius Roberts, what is the stigma that this article is talking about, and how can you relate to that?
Well, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me on the Pack Light Podcast. It's a total honor. My name is Demetrius. I'm a career educator. I also have been a football coach, a college athlete. And I am, for one, someone who truly knows what it's like to be in that machismo world of men, and what really is expected upon us. The don't cry attitude, the suck it up attitude, the rub some dirt on it mentality. And I've certainly have someone who's rather sensitive person. I sense people energies. I have that ability. And for most of my life, I can really recall spending time really struggling with the fact of my emotional experiences, my emotional reaction to things people have said to me, the way people have looked at me. I'm a large man at that. I'm 6 foot, 280 plus pounds. So people expect me to be tougher and to be able to get through. And I, for one, have struggled with that mentally, and totally relate to the article. And feeling like I can't express myself, or feeling like a stigma, of being soft or being weak, or being, the other word for a cat, by my fellow man, and that totally, took a toll on me. And it wasn't until me, going through therapy, and still actively going through therapy to really understand, um, what my experience as a man has been, and processing that to really start to work and navigate and getting past the stigmas, that I tried to avoid, on my journey into being an adult.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Dee, for your transparency and sharing that with us. Um, Rich, is there anything that stands out to you or that you may resonate with regards to what Demetrius was sharing as it relates to the article? I'd like for you to introduce yourself as well and then segue into your thoughts.
First of all, D, thank you for having me on Pack Light. I am a business owner for 23 years. I do a lot of consulting. When business is bad, I do some executive protection and bodyguard work. But I think the article is dead on, and I think what Demetrius said is dead on. You talked about in the article, you talked about how marginalized classes feel the burden of the stigma of be a man, don't cry, man up, more than others. And what people don't acknowledge is that Black men are a marginalized group. I mean, hard stop, period. So for me, for example, 2018, I was stressed the hell out. And I called a friend who always raves about her therapist, and I'm like, yo, I need his number. And when I told friends, it was like, well, what's wrong with you? You crazy? I don't understand. Don't you know Jesus? And I'm like, yo, you deal with faith and you deal with God in matters of where the spiritual and living interact. But you don't pray when your car gets a flat, right? Just like you don't pray when you got a abscess on your foot, right? You go to a doctor. You got a problem with your car, you go to a mechanic. Well, when you're a Black man in America, which is a system designed literally on your back, but to marginalize you from your very community, welfare, heroin, crack, like you are always doing this dance of code switching your way through life. And sometimes the mask gets stuck on. So you need a therapist. You need to heal the trauma from your childhood. You need to understand that your mom and your dad, they made mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. They didn't hate you, and their mistakes and the impact of those mistakes don't define you. So when we talk about the stigma, it's real, it's there. Even when you heal and try to wash it off, you have to self-parent yourself in such a way that when you interact with people who assume it's still on you, that you know how to bob and weave as not to either shrink, to not confront the situation, and play along, or to be combative and be like, yo, on me. That's not me. I don't identify as a nigga. I identify as a Black man. So therapy is extremely urgent for us. And I commend you for having this conversation.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. What jumped out at me, as well as what Dee was sharing about the stigma. I keep hearing the same narrative. There's similar narratives that leads to that stigma. And I want to come back and talk maybe a little more about that. We're going to have YaSeen go next, but maybe talk a little more about changing the narrative, like how do we, you said that you almost had to parent yourself, which means to me means that you had to unlearn some things and learn again. So tying that into changing the narrative, or sharing even more about how the stigma affects men in mental health. YaSeen, you're up next.
First of all, thank you, Big Sis, for having me. I love you. My name is YaSeen Harper from Philadelphia, 35 years old. I am in the school setting, RBT / para. Um, just to touch base on like the topic, it is an issue with, from my experience with growing up and trying to express my feelings, thoughts, how generations change. So it changes with the community and how you deal with things. I never knew how to express my feelings and emotions when, like it came a point where you used to see in your household yell a lot. And when you speak on your feelings, some parents may take it as disrespect. Like who you talking to, or like you should have a conversation about what you're feeling and what you're going through. So going through that, and then going outside, meeting friends and kids my age and stuff who had a whole nother lifestyle. Like I had to adapt. So I had to learn to bottle my emotions, to bottle my feelings up, because if you were soft, like they're gonna pick on you more and more. So like the more that I did that, I never realized how bad I was hurting myself, and not just for like the past, but for the future as well. Because when I married, even though I love my wife, it's still times where I don't speak on things. I hesitate, not communicating on my feelings. My communication was very bad, because I felt like every time I try to speak up or say anything, it's like, oh, shut up, like you being soft, you this, you that. And it's like I had to adapt where I stopped myself from being hurt, being cold-hearted. And, it was like, it was never a time where I ever thought about therapy, because I'm just thinking like how therapy is going to work if, like people around me, like, of course I had, like my siblings to talk to, but at the same time, it's like, they're not in your everyday walk, So like the more that you bottle stuff up, it played a mental game on me, and started questioning myself, like, who am I? Even when I did go to church, it was two different lifestyles. Like I go to church in Delaware and have different type of friends, different type of, views on friendships and relationships and stuff. But then when I came back home at the Philly, it was like a war zone, So I didn't know how to think. I didn't know how to move. I didn't know what was right, what was wrong. Half the times, and like I often felt myself going crazy in my mental thoughts because I didn't know how to process anything. So for this article, is on point.
So what I'm hearing is based on all of those experiences, it caused you to build a defense mechanism in how, and it affected how you communicated.
Mm-hmm.
Rich, does anybody want to add anything?
One of the things I think, and maybe we'll talk more about this, is, it's challenging. Where Rich was going and talking about being a marginalized Black man, how that plays itself out, it's a compounding effect, right? Because we're the common understanding of a black man is really limited to the few areas people see black people on TV, through sports, through entertainment, and that goes along with being marginalized. So if you're a kid, depending on your neighborhood, depending on your circumstances, you have limited access to black men. For me, I thank God that I grew up in a church where there was a lot of varying types of black men, and I wasn't limited to just my family or just my school experience, just my work experience. I did have a range of black men that, funny enough, I tell people that I picked my collection of black people, black men, to model myself off of. I got a rotation. I dress like this one. I talk like this one. I model my walk after this one. I thank God that I had an older brother that paved the way, that did positive things in his life and was able to have transparent conversations with me. But I mentioned earlier, I'm an educator. I was a teacher. I'm a school administrator. I work at consulting now for school systems. But it stood out to me when I was in the classroom. I was listening to YaSeen talk about his story. I could think of so many kids that I was one of the only black men that was doing something positive with their lives, that could talk to them about things, that saw their frustration, saw that anger on the face, and knew how to have a conversation about what was going on in their life to lead to how they were reacting to the world. And throughout my career, I experienced so many kids that were like, I don't have that person to talk to, right? I don't have that role model. And so that compounding effect of being a black man and not necessarily having other black men to talk about this, especially when for so many decades it has been the norm to be stigmatized as part of a black man. And then you add that into the drugs and the crime and the poverty that black men are overly into. When you look at our countries, you look at our numbers in the country, we truly are marginalized. And so that's all part of it. I think the key to it, which is what Rich was saying, thank you for having this podcast to create a forum for this discussion, because not enough of us are having this conversation, even in the barbershops, right?
Mhm.
The barbershops are gone these days. You got to book appointment. You don't have 20 people hanging out in the barbershops talking about much. And even when you do, we're talking about sports. We're talking about everything under the sun but our mental health. And I know I'm generalizing there. I know there's barbershops. Shout out to those barbershops out there that do talk about the deep stuff. But that's part of what needs to happen. We need to have these conversations about our experience, about sometimes the lack of role models, about how the world misperceives or misunderstands our experience, because it's different. And I think the more of us, for years, it was like, we need to get our fathers back in the families. Like, all of that had some meaning to it. It was building up to how do we get better role models, but it's got to be a step further. It's not only being in the home, but it's also being a positive role model, for your kid as a father, for other kids, for your community. Being that role model in the workplace where you might be one of only few black people, depending on what you do, that people interact with.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much for blessing us with those golden nuggets. Rich, did you want to chime in? I'm not a man, so I want the people to hear from men. I mean, everything that everyone is saying is on point. It is a much needed discussion amongst all men, but in particular, men who are marginalized. So thank you so much for standing 10 toes down on that and delivering that awesome information. So Rich, YaSeen, feel free to chime in. We want to hear from you, Kings.
Dee brought up a lot of really good points. One element that I miss personally, now that I don't have any hair at all and I just shave my head in the shower, right, is the barbershop. As a kid, easiest way to know who was in your neighborhood, who was around you, who was doing what, was the barbershop. Then with the chicken joint, Mr. Goodman with the corner store and the candy shop, like they were in the barbershop. If you had a question, you needed help with something, you could ask the barber, and he effectively was the neighborhood griot. He knew everything and everyone. Barbershops aren't what they used to be, right? But on the flip side of that, our challenge in this country is more than just economic. Our challenge is in this country is COINTELPRO's impact on the family with the creation of welfare, right? So when mothers are incentivized for excluding the father from the home, right? Nobody's playing chess. Nobody understands the long-term impact of a child growing up, seeing mommy struggling. There's going to be resentment for dad, right? Yo, dude, where are you? What's up? You know, we talk about generational wealth. Well, we don't understand business well enough to really get to generational wealth. I go to networking events with white people, and everybody's networking. They're seeing who they can or can't do business with. They're seeing who they can or can't help and build a relationship with. When you go to black networking events, it's social. Somebody's going home with somebody, right? The latest gossip is being discussed. Everybody got the little talking points of the day down, but how many lives are actually enriched when they leave? How many people walk out of there with actual business deals, right? So there's a lot of learning that we have to do, and learning and education carry just as much stigma in our community as therapy does, right? Healing. You better go to church, right? Like, come on. No, no, that ain't enough. I mean, we don't need to talk about those pastors who may be corrupt or in their humanity may make some mistakes, and boom, the whole reputation of the church is faltered. Well, he's human. I mean, we lynch our own people for their mistakes on social media more than anybody else ever could, right? And yeah, what Diddy did is wrong. Sure, Cosby dropping pills and drinks is wrong. But are we throwing away the legacies of these men and the impact of the legacies of these men based on their sins? Because I ain't God. As a young man, I was an aggressive jerk. All I wanted to do was make money and see who I was going home with that night. Did that make me a bad person? Well, they were bad decisions, but they don't define me. And when you don't learn that traumas, hurts, pains, mistakes don't define you until you get with a therapist that isn't sitting there trying to be your best friend, but they're actually sitting there poking and prodding and digging so you can get to the problem and learn how to process and reach the solution.
Thank you so much, Rich. All of that was on point. And again, Phil with Golden Nuggets. I want to keep this ball rolling. YaSeen, come on in. I see you over there twitching, so I know you got something that you want to add.
Like Rich was just saying, about people saying, you go to church, because people thinking, like going to church is going to solve everything. And like depending on your situation, like that's not the case. Like, because there was times I went to church and there was a whole lot of mess in church. You got people sleeping with other people and like a whole bunch of drama. And as a kid, seeing that as a kid, it's like you don't know what to think about that, Like, but when you are going to your daily walk or whatever, and try to figure things out about like who you are as a person, And then like you was saying, like my dad wasn't in my life. Like it's times that I seen him like used to pop up at the door like once a year, you know. And like the last conversation that I had with him, you know, he tried to convert me to Islam, and I wasn't with it. So it was like I never heard back from him again. But like I wasn't as hurt because I was so used to him not being around. And like from hearing, you know, like my mom talk about him, like made me question, was I even worth living at the time or being alive? Because you're going through these things, you don't really have a father figure. You're watching your back every day you come out the house. And then as you get older, like in the high school days, you know, like you get real for certain people for certain, you know, types of areas. Carrying guns, bring them in the house, hide them in the grill. Nobody know about, you know. And my mom tried to ask me questions about where scratches coming from on your face, getting jumped and stuff like that. But you can't talk about these things because if your parents get involved and they show up, the people gonna look at you weird, and then they're gonna make the situation worse for me. So with my relationship, you know, with God, man, was a back and forth type thing. Like it was times I believed him, it was times I ain't with any parts, and then it's like I didn't know how to move. I felt stuck. I felt like it was times I was at suicidal thoughts, you know. And I'm a Christian rapper, by the way. But I talk about these things in my songs. So that was another reason why I started writing music, because I didn't have no outlet. And I felt like if I was to keep on going down that path and I have no type of outlet to express these things, I would be with my best friend right now in jail doing 25 to 47 years. So it's like at some point, man, like I had to think to myself, like, where do I want to be in my life? If I choose to have a family, if I choose to have kids, but how can I teach them when I really didn't have that example? You know, when I first had my first son, Isaiah, I didn't know what I was doing. I ain't know right from wrong, you know, like being a dad, because I never knew anything about my dad. Like besides, you know, like the small little things, like, oh, like he used to fight, like your dad was crazy, and then times I see him pop up on me, and I'm thinking to myself, like, yeah, like this nigga is crazy. Remember, like they see you saying and stuff like that. So I'm just like, I didn't know who I was. Like, how can I learn from somebody's mistakes? You know, that's generational, like generational curse, and I don't even know him for real. So like mistakes I made that my wife be catching up on, whatever, like be making me think to myself, well, was my dad like that? Like, where do I get this from? Or where do I get that from? How can I pinpoint something or change something that I don't know where it's coming from?
Thank you for listening. I hope you were impacted by this amazing episode. Join us on our next episode's discussion, Men and Mental Health Part 2. Tell your brothers, your sons, your fathers, and all of the men in your life they're not going to want to miss this next episode. I'd like to ask you to do one thing before you go, and that's giving us a topic you'd like for us to discuss. Our email address is patlight818@gmail.com and can be found in the credits and the descriptions. Until we meet again, and remember to lighten your load and stay connected to the God within.
For the rain, ready for the war. You know we endure. We got victory and that's the shores. Why they wanna play with me? I'm back in mode. It ain't no getting over me. I was shackled to the ground, couldn't get them off of me. I was seeking, I was weeping, telling God, Lord, it's me.
Are you ready to stop dodging the IRS and finally take care of your back tax problem? If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled tax returns, or are experiencing economic hardships, you could qualify for more aggressive resolution plans with the IRS. This could be your best chance to resolve your tax debt. Act now before it's too late. Call today to take the first step in putting this tax problem behind you.
Call 1-800-578-4356. Call now.